That's home for me. And if you want to learn more about that kind of prairie out in the Loess Hills, there's a wonderful opportunity called the Loess Hills Prairie Seminar. It happens every single year. Coming up next year in 2026 will be the 50th anniversary. The Loess Hills Prairie Seminar is always the first weekend after Memorial Day. So it's usually the first weekend in June. It's a 3-day event from Friday, all day Saturday, into Sunday morning. I grew up about 10 miles from Sylvan Runkle. Gitche Manitou State Preserve up in Lyon County, way up in the northwest corner. It is as far north and west in Iowa as you can go. It borders the Minnesota boundary and borders the Big Sioux River, which is the boundary with South Dakota, of course. That's cactus you see right there. Cactus, a species called fragile prickly pear cactus. It's an endangered species in Iowa. Gitche Manitou is like another world, basically. You wouldn't recognize it as Iowa, really, because it, again, is so far north and west. It's more like the Great Plains. On the other side of the state, going from northwest way over to northeast, we see examples of hill prairies. These are really rugged landscapes, steep slopes, south and west facing slopes, because that's the kind of slope that's going to favor prairies and discourage trees, hotter and drier on south and west facing slopes. Really rugged. Sometimes these are called goat prairies because they're so rugged and so steep that only a goat can climb the slope, right? Moving over to northwest Iowa, a little bit further north and west up in Cherokee County, Steel Prairie. That's not too far from the town of Cherokee. That's a Mesic Prairie. There's Doolittle Prairie in Story County where I live. I live in the eastern part of Story County. I do walks at Doolittle Prairie every month. It's the third Tuesday. So the first one is coming up here in May. What is it, May 21st, I think is the third Tuesday. They start at 7 o'clock. They go until basically sundown, around 8:30. Again, I do these every month, the third Tuesday, May, June, July, August, and September. You can find out more information on the Story County Conservation website. Haynes Prairie up in Floyd County is another example of a privately owned prairie. That is, again, a good example of what I would call a dry mesic prairie up there, because this is an area that's got a lot of bedrock close to the surface. It couldn't be farmed because there's limestone right near the surface. It would be impossible to plow. This is kind of like the same type of situation that we see out in Kansas at a place called Konza Prairie, where there's, again, huge thousands and thousands of acres of prairie left, but there's, again, that prairie couldn't be plowed because of the shallowness of the soil and the proximity of bedrock right near the surface. Same thing happening here. Number two here, Marietta Sand Prairie. These are two sand prairies. So these are prairies that are heavily dominated by deep sand deposits, usually wind-blown sand. So basically sand dunes that are blown up from river valleys where they're near. Marietta and Marshall County and the Big Sand Mound over in Muscatine County are great examples of these sand prairies. Really cool types of environments. Again, you're going to see lots of different plants there. And finally, Tipton Prairie, here in southeastern Greene County. Those are blazing stars. Tipton Prairie can put on an amazing show of color, especially after a burn, which is something that usually helps to invigorate and increase the amount of blooming that occurs in the plants. So again, this one's not too far from home for you guys.
How large is this area?
About 3 acres.
Okay.
So it's, all of these are small, basically. The largest one we saw there, Hayden Prairie, 240 acres. But actually the Loess Hills is more than that. There's more prairie in the Loess Hills, but it's broken up, of course, a lot out there. Sylvan Runkle Preserve is about 100 acres or so. All right, so there's a quick look at some of the important prairies in Iowa and why, again, Iowa is a prairie state and why we're in the heart of the tall grass prairie. So how did this prairie come to be? Number two, a little bit of understanding of why we have prairie on our landscape. Here again is a map that shows the three types of prairie: tall grass prairie, mid-grass prairie in the gray, short grass prairie out here. That's a sequence of you're going from taller plants where we are to plants that are about waist high when you get out to middle of Nebraska in the mid-grass prairie. And then if you go way out to northeastern Colorado or Wyoming, short grass prairie, the grasses are about a foot high. So that's what short, mid, and tall mean, is the height of those grasses. And that's related to the amount of moisture that those plants have available for growth. The tall grass prairies, on all these prairies really, the central North American grassland ecosystem there, owe their existence to the Rocky Mountains. They owe their existence to those Rocky Mountains out there. Their laramide orogeny is when the Rocky Mountains were uplifted for the second time that results in the mountains that we now see and can enjoy if you would like to go out and see mountainous landscapes. So when that happened, again, after that was sort of done, of course that's a very slow process, uplifting of mountains, takes millions of years for a mountain range to form that way. Let's say about 50 million years ago when they were in place, that put into effect something that ecologists understand well as a rain shadow effect. That rain shadow effect comes because our moisture, where we are again in the temperate zone, 40 degrees north latitude, weather systems move from southwest to northeast. If you ever watch a weather map, you'll see that's how low pressure systems move. That's how weather fronts move, especially lows. And so if I back up here, water moving again from that southwest to northeast direction in the atmosphere means that water coming from the Pacific is going this direction. When they encounter the Rocky Mountains, they get uplifted. That air gets uplifted to go over the Rockies. It has to go up to go over the Rockies. That puts it into a much cooler atmosphere because temperatures cool down as altitude increases, and we get lots of rain on the windward side of the mountains. But on the leeward side, that water is gone, and now we just have dry air coming down on this side. No rain for that side of the mountain. That effect is such a strong effect, it extends a long ways to the east, really into the central Great Plains. That's why the average annual precipitation in western Nebraska is like 15 inches. So the Rocky Mountains again, in through here, causing that rain shadow effect. Here's the actual average annual precipitation on this map here. When you get into Iowa, we are much further away from the Rocky Mountains than Nebraska or Colorado, of course. And so the rain shadow effect is not so dominant anymore for us. Mainly because we get water coming up from the Gulf of Mexico. Moisture coming from the Gulf of Mexico sort of replaces that lost moisture that's not coming from over the Rocky Mountains. And it does so mainly in Missouri, Iowa, Illinois, Wisconsin. Not so much Kansas and Nebraska. Kansas and Nebraska are still feeling the effect of that rain shadow effect. But we have more moisture here now. So that's why we have tall grass prairie. We have enough moisture to tow grasses that can get up to easily over 6 feet tall. I've seen big bluestem 12 feet tall. Tall grass prairie can grow just as tall as corn grows because of the water coming from the Gulf. Prairie soils. So this is number 3. Prairie soils are distinctive and highly productive. This shows a map of what are called mollisols. So mollisols is a soil that formed under a grassland vegetation of some kind. And you can see that they correspond very well. There's different kinds of mollisols here. These are all mollisols, but just different kinds. But this basically represents somewhat a moisture level. We are in the Udalls right here, meaning we are in a mollisol that is the most moist, has the most precipitation. But again, this corresponds pretty well. If we went back and looked at that map I showed you of North American grasslands, that map and that map would have a correspondence because the grasslands produce these mollisols. The mollisols are especially deep and fertile, especially in Iowa here. And that's what gives us, of course, this map. And so again, item number 3 that you should really appreciate and understand is the reason Iowa has the, well, I guess we are the most. 19 is the percentage of corn, nationwide corn produced by Iowa. 19 for Iowa, 17 for Illinois, 8 for Indiana, 16 it looks like they're from Minnesota. You can see that dark green, that's where the heavy corn production is. That corresponds exactly to where the prairie was and produced those mollisols, those soils. Those deep, rich, fertile soils that we inherited, I guess you might say, because we moved here. This is where we call home, and the prairie is what made those soils possible. So, if you are involved in agriculture in any way, shape, or form, or appreciate, again, the importance of agriculture in our state, then you should be appreciative of prairie. Because without the prairie, it wouldn't have happened. Actually, without the prairie, and without the deposition of glacial material in the last glacier that happened 12,000 years ago in north central Iowa, I'll show you that in a little bit, or the loess deposition that happened over southern Iowa at the end of the last glaciation, if those two things had not happened, we would have soils that are very similar to this part of the world. You don't see much corn production down here. They don't have good soils. They don't have the fertility and the soils to produce corn like we do here. And there's a reason for that. Again, we have fresh geological material that came into our state at the end of the last glaciation. Fresh geological material, glacial till and loess, that provides a basis for a new, younger soil. And the entire state of Iowa is blessed with that. Here's the difference between a prairie and a forest soil, and why, if you have a map, and this is what I do for people who want me to help them understand their land, I make a map of their soils. And if I see that, whoops, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. I see that the soils they have are a prairie soil, a mollisol. See how deep that A horizon is? The A horizon is all of this darkness right here. That's the mollisol, formed in prairie. The forest soil, an alpha sol, that's the A horizon right there. Measly A horizon. The alpha sols, a forest soil is an alpha sol, also has this extra horizon called an E horizon right here. It's a lighter colored area of soil. And then it has the B horizon. The prairie soil does not have an E horizon. And that's, again, a real simple way to tell whether you are looking at a soil formed under prairie or whether you're looking at a soil formed under forest. And these signatures that happen to the soil will last, despite the fact that we don't have prairie growing anymore. We've got agricultural land on much of that. That doesn't change, that soil characteristic will last for a long time. You can still see that signature because it took thousands of years for that to develop. It's not going away overnight. So again, I can look at an area and I can tell what the native vegetation was, prairie or forest or wetland, by simply looking at a soil map. So why does a prairie produce these deep, rich soils? Because of the vegetation. and the deep root systems. This scale right here is depth in feet. 15 feet. Some of these roots are going down to 15 feet into the soil. There's more biomass growth below ground than above ground. That's how prairie plants operate. More growth below ground, more biomass than above ground. The above ground part, of course, is where photosynthesis happens. That's where plants make food, through photosynthesis. They put a lot of that food and energy down into the root system to support the function of the root system, of course, which is to absorb nutrients and water. Now, all of the perennial plants, of course, have perennial part of their root system right at the soil surface. There's a portion of that root system that lives from year to year to year to year. You know what perennial plants are. You have them growing in your gardens. Those plants come back every year in the spring from root systems that, again, have energy put into them so that they can live through the winter and come back in the spring. But that's just right at the surface.